This video is being sponsored by MacPaw. I recently put out a cinematic shots video using the FX30 and this rig, and I had a lot of questions about the rig that I was using during that shoot. Instead of answering each individual comment, I figured I would just make a video about the rig and kind of show you each component and each part, talk about it, and then also give you the price in case you want to go out there and make something similar to this. So the way that we're gonna do this is I'm gonna strip this rig all the way down to the camera body, and then I'll just build it back one by one. And as I go through, I'll tell you about the part, where I got it, and use my B cam to show you a close-up of the part, and then also I'll tell you how much it was. Now, if you've never shot with a rig before, you've gotta try it. And if you have, then you know it's, I don't know how to say the word in English, addicting. It just makes you want to create. How could you look at this thing and not want to just take it out and start filming with it? I'll leave a link in the description for all of these parts. Thanks for always using those to buy your gear. You might have some of this gear laying around, or you might be able to find it cheaper online. A lot of this stuff is the cheapest that you can find it, because that's how I built this when I was on Amazon shopping. I was just getting the cheapest stuff, and it actually ended up working out good. I didn't know if it wasn't gonna be quality products, but it was so far. And also a lot of these links that I give to you, if you go down and you scroll a little bit on Amazon, you can buy a lot of this stuff used, which is what I did. And it might come in without a screw or something, but thankfully I had a bag full of old screws, so I was able to put the screws on where I needed. If you're on a budget, then don't stop watching, because this is a pretty budget-friendly rig. Ever since I built this rig, I don't want to take it apart and then throw the camera on a gimbal, just because I love this rig, and every single time I look at it, it just makes me want to go out and shoot. Although I did build out this rig kind of budget friendly, all of the parts are very strong and durable. I've tested them out, and I don't have any problem recommending all of these parts for your rig. It's really not that complicated to build this thing out, but every part plays an essential role. So anytime you're screwing anything in with an Allen key or screwdriver, make sure you do it with a tool and not just your fingers, because if it's just finger tight, then things can get loose, and that's when it starts to wobble, and then you'll have to break the whole thing down and rebuild it back up, which I've done in the past. And for this particular rig, I was using the 7 Artisans 25mm Cine lens, but you can use whatever lens it is that you have. One benefit to a Cine lens is that it has these focus pulling teeth already built into the lens. But if you buy the focus puller that I recommend, it comes with a strap that you can put on your lens so you can also focus pull, which is kind of essential when you have a rig like this. I have used other lenses with this rig. I'm just leaving the Cine lens on for demonstration purposes. So without further ado, let's break this thing down and then build it back up. Today on the Film Alliance. All right, now I have everything laid out in front of me. Here's the FX30 and the lens. It's obviously a lot smaller than the actual rig itself, but I have to tell you, once you start using a rig, you're never gonna wanna go back to handhelds. Right now, the FX30 is selling for $17.98, and the Cine lens is selling for $549, which seems pretty expensive, but when you compare it to other Cine lenses, it's relatively cheap. They didn't cheap out when they built this lens. It's heavy and it puts out a great image. I did not get the XLR handle unit that comes with the FX30 as an accessory for some extra money, because I already have a handle and I also already have a shotgun mic. But if you wanted to get the XLR handle unit that comes with this camera, it comes out to $21.98, but just beware that it doesn't come with a mic, so you would also have to purchase a mic. But I have a bunch of extra little shotgun mics and micro shotgun mics in my drawer, so I didn't need one. But I did hear that that little XLR handle unit that comes with the FX30 isn't long enough for your hands, so you end up having to buy an extension for it from Smallrig. I don't know, just something to think about. I had this weird thing happen to me in Final Cut Pro where my audio waveforms would not populate underneath my clip for like 10 to 15 seconds. So every single time I started to edit, I had to stop and wait for them to populate. So I turned off my computer, restarted it, did the whole thing, and it was still happening. And then kind of in the midst of all of this, I had a company named MacPaw who makes the product called Clean My Max X. I'm sure you've heard of it. Reach out to me and said they would like to sponsor this video, and they provided me with a license. And so I said, what the heck, why not try it? Let it run, do its thing on my computer, and sure enough, all that stuff disappeared, and it cleaned up, I think, like 12 or 13 gigs of wasted space on my computer. So it was super helpful, and it also went through and did some security checks and it cleaned up the RAM so it runs better now. Now, I'm not saying that Clean My Mac will fix any Final Cut Pro bugs that you might have, but it worked for me. I know for a fact that it will definitely clean up the space on your computer. It'll make it more efficient. Yes, this video is being sponsored by MacPaw, but I actually really used it and it actually saved me. So thanks to MacPaw and Clean My Mac X for helping me out as I create my videos. Even though the FX30 has 5 mounting points on the outside, I still felt it important to get myself a cage, because you never know when you're in one of those situations and you're looking for a spot to screw in one of your accessories and you can't find one. This is the same cage that they make for the FX3. They just now market it for the FX30 as well. I was a little bit nervous when I first got it if it would fit or not, because I didn't know if the outside dimensions were gonna be the exact same. I know the specs don't say they are. They're a little bit different, so that made me nervous, but it does fit, so we're good to go. And you just screw in this little quarter mount screw in the bottom, and now you're all set. And then you take the top piece and you screw it into these 2 mounting points right there. And that's pretty important so that we can get our top handle on there. Remember that you wanna make sure that they're nice and snug on there and they're not loose at all. Now, don't over tighten them, but also don't be too liberal about it. You want it to be nice and firm. Also, it has a little hand grip right here so that you can ensure that you're never gonna drop the camera, which is nice, especially when you're using a rig. If you tighten it up a little bit, you don't even have to hold on to it and it'll just stay attached to your hand. That's another reason why I really like this particular cage. Right now, they're selling this cage for 109 bucks, which really isn't that bad if you think about all the functionality that it has. I buy cages for all of my cameras, and once I install them, I never take them off. I'll even throw it up on a gimbal with this cage because it's pretty light and it doesn't really affect the balance. So highly recommend. If you don't get this cage, you can get another one. It's just nice to have. The cage also comes with this quick release plate, which I don't use because I only use Arca Swiss mount plates. But if you have a tripod head that fits this size quick release plate, then you can use it. But for me, I like to use these Arca Swiss mount plates. I have all of my cameras set up with this system. It's a really easy little twist knob system that you can easily access your cameras, put them on and off tripods or gimbals or whatever it is that you need. I attach the Arca Swiss mount plate to the front hole of the tilt-a-cage because that seems to be where the center of gravity is. Another good thing about these Arca Swiss mount plates systems is that when you have this on a rig like this, you can put it on and you can move the camera forward and back. You know, it's not like it just locks into place and then you're stuck. So you can kind of slide it forward and back and then you just twist it tight. All right, you almost distracted me from not tightening the Arca Swiss mount plate down. This is probably the most important one that you have to make sure is super tight against the cage, because if you don't, the camera could pan left and right while you're trying to hold it. So it's pretty important to make sure that one's tight. You can buy both sides of the Arca Swiss mount plate for 12 bucks. It's pretty cheap. That's why I get so many of them. I lose them and then I find them and then I end up with a drawer full of them. So then you take the female side of the Arca Swiss mount plate and you add it to the camera mount base plate. You can also get this base plate for, I think, $22 on Amazon. So another pretty good deal. And you just make sure you're screwing that in nice and tight. Just as important as screwing in the Arca Swiss mount plate to the camera. And you want to make sure that it's straight, because even if it's off by 1 degree to the left or to the right, your frame's going to be cockeyed and just something's not going to feel right. And then also your follow focus won't be able to hit the lens anymore. So just make sure it's nice and straight. Now we add the 15mm 9-inch rods that I picked up from Smallrig for 20 bucks. I leave it kind of like this and then I can play with it, which side they want to go on. But I just want to make sure that this side right here, where my battery is going to be, there's enough space between the back of the battery and the back of the camera so that I can reach my hand in there and play with the settings on the camera. You also want to make sure that these are 100% centered up, so like you don't want to screw it in like that. I know that seems obvious as well, but believe me, I've done it in the past. Even just a little bit, just enough to tick you off, will throw your whole rig into kind of like a lopsided rig, and you want everything to be 100% symmetrical so that the center of balance and the frame all look correct. And the way that I do that is I just put it on the desk like that, and then I'll tighten both of them down. But again, I'm gonna go back and adjust it later. So this is where the battery goes, this is the camera, and then this is the lens and the support and a matte box if you wanted a matte box. I'm gonna go back and adjust this as I build it out, but that's just approximately, that's how I started off. I did not attach a dovetail plate to the bottom of this because I didn't need to. I knew I was gonna be shooting handheld most of the time. You would attach a dovetail plate if you wanted to be able to slide it back and forth on the tripod so that your balance is 100% center of gravity all the time. Every once in a while you might have a different lens on there that's pretty heavy, and that's where you would need to readjust the balance. But in my case, I didn't need one. In fact, I'd put an Arca Swiss mount plate on the bottom so I could attach it to my tripod, something I probably wouldn't recommend doing because there's gonna be a lot of weight under that Arca Swiss mount plate. So then I just attached the camera to the bottom rails, turn the knob, screw it in tight, make sure everything looks good and symmetrical, which it does. And now we're going to move on to the top handle, which is something I picked up from Smallrig. I couldn't find this exact Smallrig handle anymore. It has a little wooden bottom, but I did find one that's very similar to it, probably the same thing, same design. It actually looks cooler than this one, and it's 30 bucks on Amazon. But the only thing is you do have to buy an extra screw. Thankfully I had one laying around to be able to attach it to this cage. If you want to go the conventional route and just get the tilt-it handle, well then you're going to be spending about 80 bucks for it. So thankfully I already had this one and it works for me. Now if you do get this one, it's definitely not a quick release. It's just screw in with an Allen key and make sure it's nice and tight. So if you want to take it off and you're out in the field, then you're going to have to bring your Allen key with you, which is kind of a drag, but hey, at least you didn't have to spend 80 bucks on a tilt-a handle. But they do sell the tilt-a handle with the cage as an accessory, so if you buy them together, then you'd probably get a discount. So just something to think about or look into while you're searching for your perfect rig. So here we go, we're starting to look good, making sure everything is nice and solid as I build it out, making sure there's no loose parts or anything. And then once I'm done with that, now I'm going to attach the monitor. And the first thing that I'm gonna do is attach this little Smallrig tilting motor mount. It just goes right here in the hot shoe of the handle. And then once I attach it here, I use an Allen key or something small to really lock in that motor mount because you don't want that slipping around while it's on this top handle. And then it has a little quarter mount swivel screw on the top here that I attach the monitor, which is a Ninja 5 monitor. One thing that I like about this monitor is it comes with the power adapter that you need in order to power it from the D-tap battery. I've had a couple monitors in the past that didn't have an external battery source, so that was one reason why I like the Ninja 5. Another reason is because I can record externally from the FX30 into the Ninja 5 ProRes. So that's pretty important for me, especially when I'm doing higher end shoots or I'm gonna be doing a lot of masking. This Ninja 5 is 500 bucks right now, but a lot of people don't need that much monitor. They just need a little monitor for monitoring their footage. So you could probably get a monitor for about 100 bucks. And I also find that the Ninja 5 is nice because you can expose your image correctly, and also you can, especially when you're using manual focus, you can make sure that you are focused because it has focus peaking. So the little monitor tilting mount that I got from Smallrig sells for 22 bucks, and the Ninja 5 needs some type of memory. This is 500 bucks as well, but it's 1 terabyte, which is pretty big. But you can use little SSDs. I think Samsung sells them, and there's a way to attach those little SSDs, like 2 terabyte SSDs, to the Ninja 5. There's videos out there on how to do it. So this is kind of what it looks like so far. Everything is looking good. The reason why I like this tilting monitor mount is because you can easily tilt the camera back and forth. Just be careful if you go out into the field and you're gonna be out there for a long time. Bring an Allen key with you to tighten down these screws, because sometimes this will get loose and then maybe you'll be walking with it and then it'll fall down. It's super frustrating. All right, so now we're talking about power supply. I use this V-mount 190 watt hour V-mount battery, which is way overkill. It could last probably like 3 days on this camera. I use these batteries for lighting when we're outside and I don't have a power source into the wall. But it works great, and you can buy these for a lot cheaper than I did. And you can also get mini V-mount batteries to hook up to mini V-mount plates that you can attach to the back. And the reason I like this one is because it has D-tap power input, so that's how I charge it, and it also has D-tap output. And then I got this cord on Amazon, which has a D-tap input, and then it outputs to the little power adapter underneath the Atomos Ninja 5 monitor. So that's how I connect and power the Atomos when we're out shooting. And then it also has a USB right here, and that's how I power my camera. I know a lot of people use dummy batteries to power their cameras through USB-A ports, but I've heard bad things about those dummy batteries, how it could actually burn the inside of the camera, the components of it. So the safest way, the safest route to go, in my opinion, is to just hook up a USB-C to USB-A into the side of the camera, and then you should be gravy. I've never had any issues powering or continuing to power the cameras with that cord right there. So this will hook up into the D-Tap battery. Right now, this battery is selling for 160 bucks on Amazon. Like I said, you really don't need something this big. It's a little bit of overkill. You could just get away with maybe using a 90 watt-hour battery, and that would power this setup at least all day from my research. Another good thing about if you get a 90 watt-hour battery is you can actually travel in an airplane with it. Whereas like I can't go through the airport with this unless I get some type of special permission. So if we're doing a project outside and we're gonna need external lighting and I need these batteries, looks like I'm driving. Another great thing about this bigger V-mount battery for this setup is, as you can see, everything's a little bit front heavy, and once you put this heavier V-mount battery on the back, everything kind of just levels out. So that's another benefit, I guess, to getting a bigger V-mount battery. I was actually initially looking and shopping for one of those smaller ones to make this rig lighter, but this actually ended up working out good, and it looks pretty cool. I picked up this D-Tap cable to power supply with the Ninja 5 for 18 bucks on Amazon. The reason I went with the coiled version is because when you're building out rigs like this one, the more coiled wires you have, the better. They stretch, they fit around little components better, so that you don't have just wires dangling everywhere like a rat nest. So highly recommend you pick up that one. And now that we're talking about wires, another thing that I got for all of these wires are these little Velcro strips that you can pick up for pretty cheap on Amazon. And they really clean up the rig to make it not only look nicer, but also safer, because you don't want to be like going through somewhere hard or something where things are sticking out and your wire gets caught on something. So you want to try to bring all your wires together nicely, wrap them up and make it look organized. I know a lot of people say, oh, it looks good when you have bigger camera rigs for clients. That's definitely something that you have to think about when you want to build a rig like this and you're going to a client's house. You don't want your wires to just be a big jumbled mess outside of it. So pretty important, these little Velcro strips. I highly recommend them. I connected the V-mount battery to this Smallrig V-mount battery plate, which I picked up for 30 bucks on Amazon. And I connected the V-mount battery plate to these rail blocks that connect to the rods. And I picked up a 2-pack, I think also from Smallrig, for 15 bucks. So you really can't go wrong. I just connect the V-mount battery like that. I'll make sure that I open up the display because I want to have it opened in the open position when I have this V-mount battery attached. Then I'll just attach it to the back of the rig, and I'll make sure that the rails are nice and flush with this rail block before I start to tighten it down. And I also want to make sure that there's enough room right here between the battery and the back of the camera so I can get in here and mess with any of the buttons that I need to mess with while I'm out on set. If the battery's too close to the back, then it kind of inhibits the amount that you can hit the menu button, which is pretty important. Looking pretty good, starting to look like a real rig, starting to get excited. All right, so now we're gonna start hooking up the wires. There's two things you have to remember when you start to hook up your wires. The first is that you don't want any of your wires to come across the front here where these focus ring is or the aperture ring, because you just don't want the wires to get in the way of that. So I always try to make sure that I don't have any wires kind of over in this area. And then also you want to make sure that when you install the shotgun mic later, you don't want any wires to be coming across the top here or even touching it at all, because you will hear that in your video. There's a certain way that you have to make sure you connect your wire with the positive and negative touching. It seems like an obvious thing, but I guess a lot of people mix it up and go the opposite way, and you could burn out your camera that way. So I always double, triple check just to make sure, because I'm kind of paranoid about that. So the way that I hook up this D-Tap cord is I bring it underneath, I wrap it around one of the rails, just like that, and then I bring it back up through the back, just like that, and then up through here. So it's out of my way. I can still hold on to the camera just like this, and I can move this coil back and forth if I need to get to any of the settings. So that's how I do it. And then next I connect the USB-A to USB-C cord, which is the power to the camera. I go right underneath here, then I bring it through the middle, and I go right underneath the display, and I hook in to the USB-C on the camera. Then it's time to hook up the HDMI in. Make sure that you get the proper HDMI cord, because if you don't, you won't be able to record in 4K, which has happened to me in the past. This is a nanosecond HDMI cord. I got it for 18 bucks. The reason I got it is because it's so thin, and these work great for gimbals. But in this case, it's also not very stiff, so you can kind of just flex it, play with it, get it to the point where you feel like it's nice and secure and it's not going to rip out. And this is where these Velcro straps come in handy. I go ahead and just tighten it along the front here so that the HDMI cord comes out nicely. It flows perfectly. I'm not pinching this wire or pulling it down or anything. And then it goes across the front here, and it just looks good. Now, something important, especially if you're recording externally using an HDMI cord, is you want to pick up an HDMI clamp. I got this one from Smallrig. I wouldn't recommend this one particularly, just because it doesn't have the right space to screw in to make sure that your HDMI is set in place. But I did use one of those Velcro straps to keep it in place, at least until I can go out and get another one. They're pretty cheap. You can get these things for like 20 bucks. I'll throw one up on the screen. That'll ensure it won't come out even if it gets tugged on a little bit. All right, getting down to the end here, the next thing I hook up is the follow focus. I got this one from Tilta. Works great. You just throw it onto the rail, and then you adjust and you screw it on until it's nice and tight. And right now it's selling for 100 bucks on Amazon. Now, this is a time where I need to move my camera forward because the threads don't line up together. But thankfully we have the Arca Swiss mount plate, so I'll just loosen it up and then slide the camera forward. So now we got our follow focus knob set, and it works, and we're all set, and that's one of my favorite parts of this rig. Next, I'll add the other rail block to the front of the camera, just like this, because you could use this for a matte box, but I use it for more lens support, just to make sure to hold this lens up so it doesn't rip out of the E-mount from the camera. One of the things that always makes me nervous is heavier lenses on smaller DSLR type cameras, because you never know what could happen. I have an old lens support from a gimbal that I had, but they sell these for pretty cheap on Amazon, I think about 20 bucks. Another good thing about the second rail block is it just kind of holds everything in place. So now everything's just super steady. So now we're almost done. We're gonna put the audio mic in the hot shoe of the cage. The reason I wait to do this until last is because then my wires won't get in the way. Just make sure it's clamped down. This one, unfortunately, you can only do hand tight. This is the Video Mic Pro, and it sells for $168 on Amazon, but you could always get one of those micro shotgun mics, like the Comica mic or the 7 Rims shotgun mic, that they don't require any power, but I don't know if the noise floor is any louder than something like this, which has a low pass filter. So this is the setup, just like as it is. You could go out there and get some really good documentary style type shots. So once you have it built, you don't want to take it apart, and you just want to go out and shoot with it because it's built like a tank. Now, I wouldn't recommend using this as kind of like a stabilized rig, like some of the footage that you might get compared to a gimbal. This is really just kind of, you gotta stand in place, get your frame right, make sure you're focused in, and then start shooting. You can walk, and it does give a little bit of a natural shake to it, but from that cinematic video, I had a couple people who didn't like that shake. So if you wanna set this up this way, then know that you're probably gonna have to stand still and just get your frame right by pulling focus, maybe just moving, panning or tilting, or even throwing it on a tripod. If you did wanna move with it and have that super smooth look, then you'd probably need to get a Steadicam vest. So although I bought the most budget-friendly pieces for this rig, they're also the strongest. So I wouldn't recommend trying to beat me out and finding something cheaper, because every part is very essential to this rig. And if you get something that breaks while you're holding it, then it could be pretty bad. One thing that I do love about this particular rig is you can really use it with any camera that you have. So if you have the ZV-E10 or the A7 IV or the A7S III, you can use this rig. You just have to buy whatever cage belongs to your camera. Other than that, it's pretty much ready to go. So once you buy these parts and you use them, you can configure your rig different ways. I like to have mine nice and tight, but you can really use it with any camera. I used this exact rig with the ZV-E10 and it worked flawlessly. So when I look at this thing, it makes me want to just go out and create with it. I love the way that it looks and the form factor. You got a good center of gravity with it. If you were to build this thing out, the total cost is $4,087. But if you were to remove the lens and just use your own lens, then you're looking at $35, $38. And then if you didn't want to use the Ninja 5 Atomos recorder with the memory that's inside here, now you're looking at $25.61. So you can go out and just purchase any little monitor for $100 on Amazon, and that'll do the trick as long as you don't want to record externally. But other than that, this is just the perfect rig in my opinion. And I'm kind of excited because so many of us young filmmakers, entry-level gateway guys, are going to be able to go out and get some really good shots with it. So I hope this video helped you. Let me know what you think about this rig in the comment section. And if you decide to build one, if you have any questions, let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you. But until the next video, thanks for watching. I'm Joe with the Film Alliance.